Hansen, everybody. Hello, hello. Thank you for joining us today. I see a lot of people are rolling in. We'll start shortly, having slight technical difficulties in sharing this live to Facebook. So just give us a second. Why don't we just get started and we'll try to get that one in a bit. So hello, everybody. My name is Rebecca Sinclair. I am the research and policy analyst for Indigenous climate action, and I've been working on decolonizing climate policy for a little over a year now. We started on a critical critique of Canada's climate policy plans to date and have moved into phase two. So during phase two, we have found an advisory council based on the 5 biomes of Canada and representatives of those lands. During this time, I discovered that we wanted to really have fulsome conversations about the work that we're doing in phase two through a series of 4 webinars. This is the 3rd webinar of the 4th. And we're so happy that you guys can join us here today. We're here joined by an incredible group of young people from Kahnawake. So as part of the advisory council, a lot of the stuff that came up was, how are youth being involved in this conversation? How are youth being involved in what we're doing with climate policy to date, and how are we making sure that Indigenous worldview is centered around that? So part of that response was to hire our lovely Sarah Hansen as our youth intern on decolonizing climate policy. So I will let Sarah moderate from here on. And so just wanted to say thank you again for all of you to join us. And I encourage you to put the territory in which you want. I'm on Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba today. So good morning, everybody.
Bojo ani, Chimigwech Rebecca for that warm welcome. Sarah Indigenous, Thunder Bay and Dunjaba. So hi everyone, my name is Sarah Hansen. I'm the youth research intern with Indigenous Climate Action's Decolonizing Climate Policy team. I've been working on the project since August of last year, where I've been able to not only help with the Decolonizing Climate Policy Report 2, but also with their NBS Nature-Based Solutions document that we released last year during COMP. And also I was able to go to COMP with them, where I did meet these 4 individuals who I'm sharing the webinar today with. I am so happy to be here with them. I am originally from Beg, which it used to be called Pick River First Nations on the northwestern Ontario along the north shore of Lake Superior. I actually have been to Kahnawake, so I'm really excited, especially to be with these folks. Like I said, they were a group of youth who I bonded really well with over there. And they gave me a sense of home because I have been to Kahnawake. And when I went to school at Queen's University, I spent a lot of time with the Haudenosaunee who are here. So I'm going to hand it over to Carly, who is the leader of this group, and you can introduce yourself, Carly, and then hand it over to someone else. And we'll just do introductions first. So say who you are, where you're coming from, what your role is, and we'll get into some more questions later. questions. Reminds me, if you have any questions that you would like to ask, please feel free to put them in the Q&A section. I will ask them throughout the conversation. It's going to be a very informal conversation today, so feel free to ask them at any time. Over to you, Carly.
Just wait, I want to interject. I just wanted to make sure that everybody know that French translation is available. And you click on the little world icon interpretation. You can listen in French. We do have a hard stop at 1 o'clock with our French translation. So if we do go over, that won't be available. I just want to apologize for that in advance. And if you do have questions, please do not put them in the chat box, put them in the Q&A box, because our chats will go too long. We might miss them. So I don't want to miss any really good questions you have for the folks. Sorry, Carly, you can.
Gwegwe Gawinata Ujets. Hi, my name is Carly Gawinata Loft. I'm coming in from Kahnawake, specifically Kahnawake Collective Impact office. It's where I work as the youth engagement coordinator. I wouldn't really describe myself as the leader of this group. I'm someone who got it together, but honestly, each of these awesome people are as much a leader of this delegation as I was. So I'll pass it off to Julie.
Julie Degartha-Deliliujits, coming from Kahnawake as well. I'm very happy to be a part of this great youth delegation, the first youth delegation from Kahnawake to attend COP. And I also work at the Kahnawake Environment Protection Office in the community as the environmental education liaison. So I work a lot with the community, educating them on different projects that the office is doing, different environmental issues we're facing in the community, and just how to be more aware of their environmental impact. And really hoping to work more with the youth to engage them in the sort of work we're doing and get more youth on board with some of the things we plan on doing in the future. So maybe Ahuntsakete, you want to go next?
Hi everyone, my name is Ahuntsakete Mentor. I'm from Kahnawake, Mohawk Territory. I work at Banyakahanga Ungwawana Raudi Jokwa Language and Cultural Center here in the community. Actively working in language revitalization and cultural revitalization. And I'm so happy I had the opportunity to go to Glasgow with this group of amazing women, and that I had the chance to meet Rebecca and Sarah there in Glasgow as well. And I'll pass it on to Sage.
Hi everyone, my name is Garakuneta. I also go by Sage. I'm Bear Clan and I'm from Kahnawake Oni. I am currently a student at McGill University. I study neuroscience and psychology. And right now I'm at John Abbott because I'm the Youth Fusion project coordinator here. It's a nonprofit organization that works with youth, Indigenous youth only, sorry. And yeah, I don't know, I was just I'm just kind of like a community member, super passionate about the environment and our way of life. So that's why I'm here. Danu Nyalko, Rebecca, Danu, Sarah for inviting us here. We're super excited to talk about, I guess, COB, question mark. Okay, took Ningo.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about COP, but we're going to take it a step further and we're going to talk about policy and Indigenous knowledge and how those all work together. And we're going to kind of use COP as a mechanism and as a tool to show how we show up in the world. So to begin, I want to just learn a little bit more about the group. So KCI, this is maybe a specific question for Carly. So Carly, can you talk about more what KCI is, how this group formed? And if you guys have, Ahuntsakete, Sage, or Julie have any other thoughts of what the impact was of COP in specific, you guys can add that at the end. But Carly, tell us about KCI and this group.
Well, first of all, KCI stands for Kahnawake Collective Impact. We also are known by Aganigahanim, Skatned, Deyungwa Ganare, which means together we look ahead. It gives you a bit of an idea of what we try to work on. In a nutshell, KCI is a grassroots movement, a collaborative community approach towards change, which is what you'll find on our website when we describe what we do. But if I were to dig a little bit more into it, KCI is a group that gets Kahnawake Ironu, so community members here in Kahnawake, together to celebrate strength in the community to connect people who are already doing really amazing work, and at the same time to identify gaps and work collaboratively to fill them. We currently have 3 main focuses that were identified by the community in so many different community engagement strategies, but the 3 that came out as the priority were language and culture, food sovereignty, and holistic health and wellness for youth. And that's actually under the holistic health and wellness for youth category, how this initiative came about. In a lot of our youth engagement, we would hear, reoccurring themes, reoccurring concerns and areas of importance, specifically land, getting back to the land, getting back to culture, as well as a lot of concern around environmental anxiety, climate anxiety. So as somebody who had attended COP25, just kind of by chance, I was given an opportunity by a group in Quebec and saw the power of connecting with other Indigenous youth and Indigenous leaders across the globe around climate action. I saw an opportunity to, propose this project. And it was something that was really welcome by the community, by our steering committee, and by the folks here at Kahnawake Collective Impact.
That's a great story. And I love how it kind of flows in through this community approach and a community-based approach. So what are your reflections on that coming back from COP then? Do you feel like you met some of the goals you guys set? And maybe we should talk about how you guys set goals going to COP and how did that interact with your regular life? Maybe you could do one off on this one by one. Let's go through the introductions again. So Carly, Julie, Hansen, and then Sage, just for.
Sure. Also to build off of the point of community approach, I forgot to mention, so these wonderful youth were actually selected by community. What we did was we created a registration form, application process, and we put together a committee of community members who work with youth and do community work. And they went through all the applications, and we had many amazing youth, and these 3 stood out and were selected. So in terms of our goals and what we hope to achieve at COP, that's something that we decided together. It was something that, we came together and talked about on multiple occasions. And I mean, I'm sure each of them will tell you different parts of the goal and different aspects, but if I were to put it into a quick sentence, we really wanted to attend COP, bringing everything that we know about our community, our nation, our understanding of climate action, and share that. And in return, we hoped to meet other Indigenous youth and hear, their approaches, their nations, ways of looking at climate action and the solutions that they have, and hopefully bring that back.
Yeah, Julie. So how does that then fit into this Kahnawake Environment Protection Office and the education?
Yeah, for sure. I think the same things that Carly said. We really went to learn as much as we can from other nations, from other youth that were attending, to see what they were doing in their communities regarding climate change mitigation and adaptation. Like I mentioned, I'm working with the youth to get them more involved in some of these efforts in our own community. So I wanted to see what other people have been doing, how they're incorporating their youth into these conversations, how they're including their traditional knowledge into a lot of these policies that they're doing, these actions that they're doing, what that can look like in different ways. And a lot of what we've been doing at KIPO at the Environment Office in Kahnawake is incorporating more of that two-eyed seeing approach into our work, where you're looking at climate change policy, adaptation, mitigation through a Western mindset, worldview, and you're also looking at it through a traditional perspective and incorporating those to move forward. And it's interesting to see that a lot of communities across the world, Indigenous communities, are using this same method. And so, yeah, I was happy to learn from a lot of different great people.
Great. And then the Hansen on the language piece, I know language is a big barrier in these spaces. And when you think of COP, especially for Indigenous peoples, being there and not having access to that same language accessibility of like French and Spanish, how does that fit into the goals of the KCI group here and what you did at COP and the goals you were looking towards?
Yeah, so one of the goals we had as a group is to always carry ourselves with the teachings that we have from our community. That's to have Rio, to have a good mind, and to be grounded in who we are as Kahnawake people. So we definitely took that into COP, and I think it really helped us, feel comfortable there, because ultimately it's not a welcoming space, COP. And we always have that to tie it back to, why are we at COP? We're there for our community. We're there for our people. So I think that part of the language, just share stories with other Indigenous youth that were there, that really centered us and really put everything into perspective. So I think that's what language does for us overall. It's grounds us in who we are. And I think it's important for this climate work because it's so heavy, and to have that is really important.
Definitely. And last but not least, Sage, this is kind of a general one, and it does go towards this following conversation of like representation. And specifically, I wanted to talk about tattoos and Indigenous tattoos, because this is a conversation we bonded over at COP. And I just want to know, like, how does your work in tattoos relate to this COP experience? How and what were the goals you had as an individual going there?
Yeah. So okay, let's take a step back and first say, like, I'm not a professional in any way. I just kind of grasped it this last year or so, and learning about the wampum belts a lot more, and learning about teachings and where each story of tattooing originates from. So I'm in no way, I just really like, it's like a new connection I made with drawing them and feeling more grounded with these elements. And it makes you go back to where initially it goes back, for storytelling and where tattoo originates. So I was taught recently, or within the past year, that tattoo originated from the woodpecker, and how the woodpecker taps on the tree, and that's where we get our stamping from, and would go back to the red orc of the tree, and internet connecting that, and that's why our colors are so strong with red, black, and white. So it's really interesting to go back there. But like when we think about representation of Indigenous people in COP or in this very colonial environment, it's like, it's who we are, it's our identity. Like as soon as you get that ancestral mark of our tattoos, you are carrying yourself with those teachings into those environments. So all you can do then is like, it's grounding yourself. So when you speak at these colonial environments, it feels like your ancestors are right behind you, holding you up. And that's how I like to view tattooing. And then with each, like, it's painful as heck, to get those traditional stick and poke ones. Like I got my whole leg done. I can tell you it hurts. But like when you go, I was recently talking to my tattoo artist, she goes by Terry Dactyl, and she's Wendat from the Wendat Nation. And we discussed this because I asked her, I went to her, I'm like, can you do this for me? And she's like, yeah, we're going into ceremony. And if you think about tattooing a ceremony, you're going there with, again, like love and a good mind. And both parties have to have that. So when we go into these environments, we're bringing ceremony with us, and we carry ceremony with us and our identity, so it just feels extra strong and extra deadly. But then we go into this COP environment, and it's like, well, COP doesn't have this Rio. They're thinking about themselves, whereas we are thinking about and carrying our community with us. So that's how I see, like, when you see tattoos, a lot of them are most visible on the face, right? And we have ours on our arms and our chest and legs. But yeah, it's just like, it's who we are, it's our identity. And once you get a tattoo and you say you're disconnected, you're regaining that teaching. So I would say you're remembering yourself into your community, you're remembering your teachings. As soon as you do that, you're an active member again. You can, there's many ways you can go about that. That's like just one way I thought about it. But yeah, that's how I think about it. And like it's getting to be more open, because I've been fighting this within the medical industry, because I'm actually part of it, a few like groups. And if you have ceremony on you, that shouldn't be inflection on how you do your job, like that shouldn't limit how you do things in your professions, especially physicians, because you see a lot more physicians with tattoos now. It's more acceptable. So I think if you carry yourself with ceremony, it's okay in that sense. I don't know if that's kind of clear or not, but let me know, please.
No, that's definitely clear. And it kind of does help me formulate my next question of like, how did you guys keep ceremony alive throughout the 2.5 weeks at COP? But also in these like general policy spaces, because a lot of times when we think of policy, and especially like Western policy and like the dominant policy, a lot of these spaces are toxic and not conducive to us as Indigenous youth. So how did you guys keep this ceremony alive? Anyone who wants to answer first.
Well, something that we did every day is we had almost like a talking circle, like a debrief every day. You know, we were there from sometimes 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., long days and draining days, and we'd come together and put our minds together and really like go over what we're going to take from the day, and really center us on having a good mind and not letting all that stress get to us, because it really easily could sometimes because of the subject matter. But I'd say that that's something that we did every day at COP.
Yeah, and I definitely know that just talking about that, debriefs are good. But yeah, Julie, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I was gonna say, along with like just talking with each other at the end of the day and checking in. That's what we did a lot throughout every day, is checking in on each other and making sure that we're okay. And just saying, how are you feeling today? How are you doing? Like, what's going on? Because it can be a lot in those spaces. It can be very heavy. And so just checking in, laughing with each other, making sure we're okay, and reminding ourselves to stay grounded, reminding ourselves why we're there and what we're there to do. And just, being there for each other is really important.
Yeah, I can't stress enough how much we centered laughing with each other as a way to stay grounded. And I appreciated that so much from this group. I can mention, for example, when I had gone to COP25, I didn't have that same support. And that's something that was very different. And I would say very necessary for Indigenous youth who are trying to enter these spaces, is to go with community. And if you can't find community when you're there, find people who you can connect with and laugh with. And I think that's another thing we did. We centered relationship building and listening to other people's stories. And I think that's something that helped us build these really strong relationships with people from all over the place.
Yeah, and Sage, I don't know if you have anything to add, and maybe this question will bring it up for you. Is I know you guys in particular spent a lot of time at the action space, and maybe you guys want to share what that is, because to be honest, I didn't spend a lot of time there, but the one day I was able to go was before the big march on Saturday. So we were there on the Friday, and we had the welcoming ceremony, and I know for both myself and Rebecca, that was one of our most empowering moment at COP, because of the community who was there and the community we felt. And you guys had a very special group of community from your own community, but maybe you guys want to touch on the action space and like what that means for Indigenous youth and Indigenous people in this space, because I think that's also a big part of COP and policy, is that other side. So yeah, anyone want to answer this question?
Yeah, I could say that. So what that space was working together to prepare and do different art builds and things for the different direct actions. I know Sage and Carly can speak a bit more about the action that they were more involved in planning, but that's what that space is for, and preparing for these different types of things. And I want to say that I think those types of actions and those types of activities are sometimes more important than some of the negotiations that were going on. I've heard people say that these direct actions, these people that are on the front lines doing these sorts of things, are having a bigger impact than some of the negotiations can do, than some of the policies can do. And so it was a really great experience to be part of that and see all the effort and the work that goes into that, and the impact it can make.
Yeah, I would just add to that. So there's action spaces at COP. There's action spaces all over the place, but at COP specifically, it's a little bit more structured. You often have to if you're doing it on the premises for COP, you have to do an application to the UN, which is a bit strange because when you think of actions, there's supposed to be disruptions from the usual go-to political discussions and debate. There are ways to make our voices heard in a space that doesn't always make space for them, in fact, usually doesn't. And I would say what's useful about direct action at COP is it can impact the conversation. It can interject when we need to have other voices heard. And also it's a really good practice, I think, for some youth who maybe are only familiar with the policy side of it and it's their first time seeing an action, because that's something you can do back home. Like when we talk about solidarity actions, like solidarity with Wet'suwet'en, you can, if you learn about what it takes to gather people and mobilize them in this a little bit more controlled environment, you can take that home and you can do it because it does have a good impact. And it's something that brings people together and makes other people listen.
Definitely. And I think the point of like the action space is to bring a different perspective to policy and into this topic of climate action. And this is where we're going to move to the next part of the question. If we're going to be more general now into like, what do you guys see as climate action? A very simple question, but it seems anyways, but it can have a lot of thoughts. So tell me, what do you see as climate action? And it doesn't have to be like this big elaborate response. It can be just language revitalization. So Hansen.
So for me, I think climate action is speaking truth to power. And that's what we tried to do through those direct actions with the march on Saturday that had over 100,000 people. We also participated in the missing and murdered Indigenous women action. But really, climate action to me is, calling out politicians that are making false promises and, really bringing truth and light to what's going on in the climate space. Because being at COP, you see that there's a lot of shady things that happen. There's a lot of polluters that are at the COP spaces where Indigenous people aren't welcome. So really shining a light on that kind of stuff, that's how I see climate action.
Definitely. Julie, how does this fit within the education of youth?
I definitely agree with all the points that Hansen made. Those are definitely how I see climate action as well. And yeah, education for sure. It's necessary, it's needed. Like the youth are the ones that are going to be making these decisions in the future. They're our seventh generation. We need them to be aware of all of these different things that are going on, the actions that they need to take, the decisions that are being made for them now. They need to be educated on what's going to happen, what the reality of their future is going to look like. And that's climate action, sharing with them, educating them, getting them involved in this type of work, creating the spaces for them. And I think climate action also is the community efforts, what your community is doing locally, what kind of programs you're creating for your community, what kind of things you're doing to make your local environment better, right? Those are all direct actions you can take.
Mm-hmm. I do have another question similar to this. Sage or Carly, do you have anything to add? Shake your head, no. Okay.
I was just gonna say, climate action, it's very broad, of course. And I wanna let other young people know that climate action can be as simple as getting yourself out on the land or learning, how to plant certain foods. We work on food sovereignty initiatives here, which is, we have a Three Sisters garden. We also support community members in getting garden plots at their own homes. So climate action can also be your own connection to the land. And, the more you get involved with that, it goes hand in hand. You're gonna wanna fight for the land that you have, the traditions that you have. By reconnecting to them, that's what, inherently is gonna be, that fire is just gonna be lit in you. So that is also climate action too. You don't have to go to COP.
That is 100% true. You don't have to be at COP. What I always said at COP was Indigenous people have the right to be there, but we also have the right to choose not to be there. And that goes for our youth too. I also, Hansen, love telling the policy people right now, the dominant ones, what they're doing wrong. So this goes into the next part, the next question of like, what would you say to older policy advocates, activists, or mentors across the climate movement in to guide them so we can uplift and center youth beyond just climate strikes? Another big question, I know.
I would say, well, I would ask them what they're doing to include the voices of Indigenous people, people of color, youth into these policies that they're making, right? Have they consulted with people that are going to be directly impacted by the decisions that they're making, or the people that are being directly impacted by climate hazards? Have they talked to them? Are they supporting them? Are they funding what they're doing for their communities? Because they're the ones seeing these impacts firsthand, right? Their traditions, their cultures and languages are being directly impacted every day, like probably more than the rest of the world. So what are they doing to support that? How is that being incorporated?
Definitely. Anyone else have any thoughts?
I just want to say that it's important for these policymakers to approach Indigenous people as nation to nation. A lot of the times we went to COP and we met some politicians that approached us in more of a trying to recruit us kind of way, but rather than a seeing us for who we are and hearing our perspectives and listening to us. So I would say that that's really important for people dominant in the climate space, is to approach Indigenous people as their equals rather than somebody that is a means to an end. You know, we have a lot of the knowledge that these people need to combat climate change, but they don't listen to us. So I would say that it has to be a change in their perspective of how they see Indigenous people.
Yeah, that's true. That nation to nation relationship building, it has to happen not just within Canada or so-called Canada, but globally. I think as we think more globally, and we can start lessening to think about like borders as an issue, because Indigenous peoples I don't believe in borders anyways. I believe in like a traditional land that I would own, but a conversation my mom and I actually had recently about Thunder Bay in particular is that this actually would have been our land if you think back, way back before even colonization and first contact, because we would have, like Anishinaabe people would travel the whole Great Lakes region. So like that would have been my whole traditional lands. But yeah, it's interesting to think about. Do you guys, Sage or Carly, do you have any thoughts about like what you would say to those politicians or advocates about how to involve youth? Sage, I know you've been pretty quiet recently. Would you like to say something?
I mean, like what I want to say, I don't think I could say it on here, but it's more like stop using Indigenous people just to fit like your quota of like talking to Indigenous people. More like put action to your thoughts, because that's like what happens a lot of times is that they just discuss with Indigenous people, or they discuss with one Indigenous person and they say they met with the whole nation. I'm like, what? No. So it's like, you know, put action to what you're trying to say. Like a strike does what? It stops you in your tracks for that one moment, but does it really combat what the corporations are doing? You know, like corporations are, and capitalism is our like worst friend in climate change. So it's like, how do we stop that? So yeah, I don't know. I don't really know where I was going with that, but yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Carly, do you have anything to add? I see your mouth like opening.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think it's really important too to say, or what I would like to say to them is be more flexible, because the way that politicians and even funders and even nonprofit organizations engage with Indigenous people for these kinds of initiatives is by putting them in a box. It's by asking you to be this kind of Indigenous activist, this kind of Indigenous policy negotiator, to fit their perspective of what is professional, what is expected. There's this idea that your voice can only be heard if you are speaking to me the way I want to be spoken to, if you are speaking to me at my table. And that makes no sense to me. I think that makes no sense to a lot of people, because clearly, you know, this is COP26 going on to COP27. So something's not working. Something hasn't been working. And I think when you look at the work of Indigenous youth, Indigenous communities in terms of land defense, that's where things, I'm gonna use a swear word, that's where stuff is getting done. So be flexible. Don't demand that Indigenous people fit your box. Find ways, creative ways, to get that funding to them anyway, to get that support to them anyway, and recognize that they're not being unprofessional. The actions are just as valuable as policy negotiations. And that even if you're a policy negotiator, even if you're someone who's more in that like COP space, that doesn't mean you don't have a role in supporting the way that, you know, frontline land defenders do their work, the way that Indigenous youth approach climate activism. So be more flexible, find ways around it.
Can I just add a little bit to that, what Carly was saying? Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to like take it over a little bit. But I just want to say also that Indigenous people are not obligated to clean up your colonial climate mess. Like we are here and we like there's a moral obligation. There's a moral obligation as Ngwahine people because this is our mother and we're here to protect her. You know, we're not gonna just watch as these corporations hurt her. You know, she's our mother. She like fills us with everything we need in life and she takes care of us way after we leave. Like she takes care of our bodies and our spirit will go back to Sky World. So it's just like, you know, like we don't have to, but we do in the sense that it feels like we're morally obligated because of our connection to land and our connection to spirit. So that was just it. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. And I think it goes into my next question, and I'm gonna kind of edit this next question a bit because I think the last part may not be as relevant, but I also just want to mention that I also personally think of like my climate work as like a responsibility. It's not a choice, it's a responsibility I have to like myself, my ancestors, and also the next 7 generations. So without further ado, like what do you think environmental advocacy organizations, so ENGOs, what do you think they could do that are not led by Indigenous people to do better? Like, how can they do better? Because like Sage just said, we're not here to clean up your colonial mess. So what can they do better?
I can make a quick comment here. So part of this group, a supporting factor for Kahnawake youth delegation was actually a broader group known as the BIPOC to COP initiative, which sent BIPOC youth from all over to COP as well. And I think one of the things I can really say that was good and done really well by the funders, the folks who are supporting us, they met us where we were at and they didn't make us jump through hoops, you know? So when you want to include Indigenous people, Indigenous young people, again, like don't force them to come to your table and meet all your expectations. Don't find ways to make it harder on them. Find ways to make it easier. Find ways to make it easier to get Indigenous youth into these spaces and to have their voices heard. And into your organizations if they want to be there. And if, you know, they don't want to be there, find ways to, because it's not, you know, I see people put, or organizations with job postings and they'll say, well, no Indigenous person applied. Okay, either try harder or find another approach because maybe they don't want to be in your org and maybe there's a reason for that. So yeah, open up your approaches and really prioritize it. Because if you're just saying that you're trying to include more Indigenous people and you don't do much beyond that, you're going to get the same results.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think a big part of this is listening, and really listening to what we're saying, because I don't think anything we're saying today is new. I think it's been said by a lot of Indigenous youth and a lot of our family members in the past, for the past like so many years. But does anyone else have anything to add to this question? Okay, I'm going to, oh, Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say I agree with Carly, and I would say that you have to listen to these different groups on what they're saying, these different communities, because like I said before, they know the land, they know their environment. You have to give them the spaces and support them to make the decisions on their lands. So if you're supporting one of their projects in the community, if you're supporting them through funding, let them make the decisions what they're going to do with that funding, because they know. You can't tell them what they're going to do on their land, right? Just support the people that know the spaces.
That's so true. And we're gonna go, we have two last questions. This one is around COP specifically, and the next one will be around climate action generally. But in COP, in relation to next COP, what are you guys doing to prepare for COP 27 if you're going? Do you plan to send another KCI group, and what do you hope to come out of it in the future? And what are your thoughts? Yeah. Would anyone like to go back again? Is maybe a better question to start with, and then because I do know it was a very turbulent 2 weeks, especially considering COVID. But yeah, Carly, I'll let you go now.
Oh, well, I was just going to answer from like the KCI perspective. We intend not only to send another delegation, but the idea is to always keep these youth engaged. That it's not we just send youth to COP, they come back to the community, and that's it. This group, they're amazing. They're on their free time, have been meeting up. We've been meeting up to talk about next steps. How do we engage the community more? How do we, host initiatives that they're going to come to? And in the future, we hope to send, more youth and to keep growing this network of Kahnawake Ironu who want to work together.
Great. Does anyone else have any perspectives from their jobs or personally? Yeah.
When I first left COP, my answer would have been no, that I would not like to go back to COP just because of the space. But now, upon reflection, I think it's important that we went to COP, and I would like to, help the next delegation that KCI brings to really show them what COP is and to help them navigate that, because there's a lot of great information at COP. It's just a matter of taking that and translating it really into something that our community can use, because there is diamonds in the rough that take place at COP. So I think I would go back.
Great. Sage or Julie? You could just say no. You can shake your head no.
Oh, you go, Julie.
Sage, you were first. Go ahead.
Damn it. Yeah, I could initially when I got back, I was like, did that actually happen? We all discussed this being is COP actually real? Was that the same universe we were in? Because I came back and I went just back to school and work, and I was like, what is this? But upon reflection again, open to get there, what you're doing, I would totally go back, and I would love to be a part of helping the next generation in guiding them. And then most importantly, and I think this is the aspect we really got to work on as a team, is keeping them grounded and keeping them to touch with their traditions and language and knowledge. Because I felt when we were there, just for me, it was not inviting. It was inherently colonial, and it felt like all eyes were on us. And it was we were the token Indians in a sense almost. I don't know if anyone else felt like that. But yeah, so yeah, I would go back, and looking forward to kicking ass.
Let's definitely do that together. Julie, how about you?
Yeah, I don't know if I would go back. Like everybody else, I said I wouldn't when we got back because it was so much. And I don't know if it's the space for me personally to be in, but I would support any youth in the community. I would support these guys in any way possible to get them back there, because I think youth from our community need to have that experience and learn for themselves and see what it is. and work towards maybe being in these spaces. It's maybe not for me, but there needs to be Indigenous youth in these spaces still. So I want to work towards supporting them to be there anyways.
That is like the perfect way to jump into our last question of what is your vision for climate justice if nothing were a barrier? Big question. I know, give you a minute to think about, and then whoever would like to start, just unmute yourself and tell us.
I would say that my vision is that there's a different system in place, because I think we're seeing that the systems we have aren't working. So maybe we need a completely different shift. Maybe we need to focus less on these policies, these bigger negotiations at the UN level, and focus on what we're doing in our communities. I think that's more impactful in our everyday lives, right? We need to support what these youth want to do, what these communities want to do. It needs to be from bottom up, I think. Support what people are doing on the ground and have that influence what they're doing at a higher level.
Yeah, great. Carly, would you like to go?
Here, I was thinking I had time to jump back in. I mean, what first comes to mind is, oil and gas corporations back the hell off. Indigenous people having, full autonomy. I'm not a huge fan of the word sovereignty, but sovereignty of our lands, being able to, fully, reconnect land back. Yeah, it's hard because when you're thinking of like what it could look like in the future, like Julie says, it requires such a different system if we're thinking about is really necessary. But I think it does start there. It starts at the community level, and not necessarily these massive negotiations, and starting small and allowing the people who have had all this time, like Indigenous communities have been doing this way before COP, way before the UN. So to really focus all the resources there and allow us to rebuild that and continue connecting the ways that we are and supporting community initiatives, and then see where that goes in terms of how much further we can take it and how much it can grow from there.
That's powerful. Hansen.
When I think about climate justice, I think you have to talk about all of the climate injustice that we've seen over the years, with just in Canada, we have Wet'suwet'en, Fairy Creek, and you see the response that the government takes towards Indigenous people. And I think there has to shine a light on that and really support our Indigenous brothers and sisters across Turtle Island. So that's how I see climate justice. It's kind of on a bigger scale, but definitely what Julie and Carly said, strengthening our own communities so that we're strong internally, and then we can support our brothers and sisters across Turtle Island.
Yeah, I love how you guys all fit together. And Sage, what would your vision be?
Well, they all kind of took the words out of my mouth here, but just grounding ourselves again. It's really to be sovereign, I guess. Oh, it's an ugly word, but to be able to go back to our traditional ways of life and being and teachings and growing our sustenance from the land, bringing everything, everything you take, you give back twice, or just thinking about 7 generations ahead. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're the 7th generation now of our ancestors, so we need to be thinking ahead, and we still take those teachings we had from the past, it's embedded in us. So I don't know, just land back, Doga. That's all I could think about. Yeah.
No problem. Land back and I think system change are 2 very big things that are definitely needed. And it's stuff that we've been hearing throughout our interviews and survey, especially as we start to talk about policy and even thinking about you guys are getting icky from sovereignty. I get icky from the word policy. And that's not an uncommon thing we've heard of. Policy and sovereignty and all these big words of really just trying to live in a good way. Minopa Madswin, as Anishinaabe say. It's such a simple concept, but colonial governments think it's this big thing that they can achieve. But you guys, I think, have really inspired me today to know that we can achieve it if we just listen to our youth. And I think without further ado, I'll hand it back to Rebecca to kind of lead us in the closeout of this webinar and to give you guys all a big chimigwich from my heart. It's been great to talk with you. Rebecca, over to you.
I am so grateful for all of you guys to be here and to share your words of wisdom with everybody that's been watching. We had a pretty good turnout, so I appreciate all of the people that showed up to this webinar too, to see and hear from these amazing young leaders. I like when you were talking about, like Sarah had mentioned, like policy and sovereignty, and part of this conversation that we had, we're really exploring how this English or this colonial kind of construct of like how we've incorporated the English language into our words, and how that's like disconnected us as Indigenous folks in our ways of knowing and our ways of being. So like when we talk about policy, what we're really talking about is the protocol of natural law. And we're following that protocol. So not the Western ways of what we think of policy. And I think when a lot of the questions that came into were like, how do non-Indigenous organizations deconstruct this? How do we incorporate this into our systems? And really it's about like, are y'all listening? Because we all gave some really good, really important feedback here. And this isn't the only space that feedback has been given, right? We consistently say it, and we consistently say it in every corner that we are. It's part of our being to like stand up and say that stuff, right? So I just want to express my gratitude and Naskamitin for like sharing all of that stuff. Definitely during phase 2, a lot of these reoccurring themes have come up, and those themes are we need language, because the language is our original instruction of the land. Without that language, we're trying to co-opt more Western ways of thinking, like policy. What we're talking about is protocol. We need this mind shift. Your systems aren't working. Your conference of parties is not working. So we need a mind shift. And those Indigenous folks, like these youth here, show up to those spaces to continuously say and advocate and remind you that we need that mind shift. If you want real solutions that are embedded in sovereignty of Indigenous folks, we need this mind shift. And it needs to be rooted in our own language and our own ways of knowing. So this is just amazing. And I think like even just the more that we ground ourselves in what we know from our elders and from the land, the more we do that, the more change we see. And that they always say the youth are the future. And heck, I feel pretty hopeful if you guys are in the future of policy making and change making and advocating for our land. So thank you so much for that. I know that we're wrapping up, and I don't know if you guys want to close out with any last words that you want to, have people listen to or be a part of our phase 2 Indigenous led solutions. I'd be so grateful. So Kahnawake.
I don't have closing words, but I realized I completely forgot to mention one really impactful elder who had been supportive and had been attending COP before we had even thought of it or knew what it was. Kenneth Beard, he's a community member. He's been going. He has always been an advocate there. And we're just incredibly grateful to have had his support. And I think that's another message to young people who want to get involved is find those elders who have been there and are doing this and can support you, because it makes a big difference.
I just want to say Nyawagoa for having us, for creating this space for us to share. To everybody that's been sending really cool comments in the chat, thank you for that. It's really nice to see everybody watching from all over. And maybe if they want to follow up on some of the stuff that we're doing, maybe they could follow KCI's social media pages or the Environment Protection Office's social media pages. We share a lot of the different activities that we're going to be doing. So that's Kahnawake Environment on Facebook and Instagram. Carly, maybe you want to share KCI's?
Yeah, it's Kahnawake Collective Impact. It's a long Instagram handle, but it's there.
I just want to thank Yawagoa too for inviting us to talk today. And, you know, Sarah and Rebecca mentioned the language revitalization and how important it is, not just for climate action, but for who we are as Indigenous people. So I just wanted to mention my organization, or KORGanawage.org. Visit our website. We do a lot of important work for language and cultural revitalization in our community. I
guess I'll say Nyawako Oni. Like everyone, I love you all. I don't have a corporation I'm with, so don't follow my Instagram. But Nyawako, and just to remember, like, if anything goes to worse and the prophecies fall through, you know, like Mother Earth will just take care of everyone. We'll be good. So,
Man, we got so many questions, and I wanted to apologize for not getting to everybody's questions. And if you do want to reach out to us, I put my email address in the chat channel there. And yeah, so this recording will be available on our Decolonizing Climate Policy webpage on Indigenous Climate Action, so you can follow us there, and our social handles will be there as well. So thanks everybody for joining us. Kanas kamitin, agosay.
Kimiigwech.